You are listening to the Joe on Joe podcast, the only podcast where Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Welcome back to Joe on Joe. I am your host, Joe Slepsky, and we are flying solo this week for a fantastic episode of G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, entitled The Germ. The Germ is a very cool episode which features very little Cobra and just a lot of G.I. Joe trying to solve a problem that Cobra created. You'll see as we get into it. And remember to follow me on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram at JoeOnJoePod, or you can send me an email, joeonjoepod@gmail.com. And remember, if you like the show and you want it to continue and grow and be prosperous, you can tell your friends, tell your G.I. Joe loving friends, share the word, share the good word of Joe on Joe. And if you're so inclined, go on iTunes and leave me a review. We're also available on Stitcher, and we're also available on iHeartRadio. So you can get Joe on Joe anywhere you go. And I really appreciate you guys listening each and every week. And so, without further ado, we're going to get into G.I. Joe, The Germ. As I said in the intro, this is one of those fun episodes where it's not a typical Cobra has a giant bomb or Cobra has a big old scheme. This is actually a scheme of Cobras that just gets out of hand immediately as the show starts, and we roll right into G.I. Joe saving the day. As you see, it's literally going to be man versus nature. G.I. Joe versus a giant, really well-animated germ is what we're going to get into. We are chugging along on the show, by the way. Next week, we are going to get into one of my all-time favorite episodes. Be sure to come back for that one. And in the meantime, we're going to get right into this episode now as the credits roll, and boom, The Germ, written by Roger Slifer. I'm not sure if it's pronounced Slifer or Slifer. Roger is an old-time comic book writer. I don't mean to say old-time, but back in the day, he wrote a ton of great comics. He wrote some Defenders, he wrote some Avengers, he wrote Fantastic Four, Marvel 2-in-1, Power Man, Green Lantern, Green Arrow. He did a little, he edited on Green Lantern, Green Arrow. And Roger's biggest contribution to the comic world, which I think we all should absolutely take our hat off and give him a big thank you, is Roger created Lobo with Keith Giffen. He is the co-creator of the intergalactic bounty hunter that we all know and love, Lobo. So real quick on the show, there's a lab with some bacteria and like a scientist doing some bacteria tests, and a Crimson Guardsman breaks into this lab and he steals this bacteria and he escapes, and he's heading back towards the swamps. Cobra's always in a swamp, and he's getting a little he's getting a little talk back from some of the regular Cobras. They call him elite with a little hatred in their voice. And he hands the bacteria to Destro.
But soon it will be a conqueror of worlds.
Destro is very excited about the potential that this bacteria has. It turns out Crimson Guardsman is a little lippy sassy with Destro. He's basically saying, my orders come from Cobra Commander to not leave you alone with this bacteria. Cobra Commander does not trust Destro with what he's up to. Destro's very upset.
Destro departed in anger. What are your instructions?
Ooh, turns out the Crimson Twins are in the mix. They're on basically an Apple smartphone, and he's talking to them. And they give the Crimson Guardsman instructions to take the bacteria back to Extensive Enterprises. So that's what this Crimson Guardsman is about to do.
Bacteria X.
And he grabs it. Bacteria
What's
X.
this?
Oh, what's this?
Experimental growth
He also
serum.
grabs some experimental growth serum, which I wonder if that's associated with some of the plant growth stuff that Duster has done in previous episodes. I'll bet it is. Televiper sees that there's a theft in progress, and we get the blue shirt Cobra Troopers chasing down after the red shirt Crimson Guards Trooper. It's like an internal Cobra civil war. It's pretty sweet. It's kind of cool. So they're drawing guns on him. He escapes in a Cobra glider.
You might hit the vials.
And we've got a big Cobra on Cobra chase right now. Their base, by the way, it's flanked by a lot of foliage and a lot of swamp, and it's hidden. But they've got like 5 giant ICBM missiles just at the ready, ready to launch. Kind of ominous if you're looking at it from above. So they keep shooting at this Crimson Guardsman. Now all these Cobra soldiers are completely unaware that the Guardsman is carrying this bacteria X, and he's warning them, we're going to crash, and we don't want this stuff to get out. They rip his tunic. And both of these vials, they crash, they hit the ground, they mix, and they become this glowing, very much like the movie The Blob, both the original Blob and the remake that they did in the mid-'80s. It's this purple, bright pink / purple glowing blob that's feeding on organic life, and it very quickly grows to ridiculous proportions. And the Cobras keep fighting because it's not just that Crimson Guardsman that they're fighting against. They're also fighting the troopers that were on the Cobra Hydrofoil. They're kind of on Guardsman's side. And they point out that this gigantic glowing amoeba is just eating up their base. Their base is kind of a prototype terror drone. And it's pretty out of control pretty quickly. So back to Roger Slifer. He created Lobo, right? And he wrote a bunch of other G.I. Joe stuff. He did a ton of animation. He worked on the Marvel Rampaging Hulk. He worked on My Little Pony, Transformers, Bucky O'Hare, if anyone remembers Bucky O'Hare. And he worked a lot with Steve Gerber and Marv Wolfman, who they wrote a ton of G.I. Joe stuff too. So super talented guy. And unfortunately, a couple years ago, he was in a terrible hit-and-run accident out here in California in Santa Monica. The driver fled the scene. I don't think they ever got him. I remember hearing about this. And, unfortunately, he passed in 2015. So it's too bad. He was a super talented dude. And I think this episode is a real testament to it. It's a lot of fun, and it's offbeat. And not surprising to see that he was buddies with Steve Gerber and Marv Wolfman, two of the most, two other guys are the most talented writers of their era, who did write offbeat stories. Back to the show real quick. The Joes are on the case. We got Ace and a bunch of other Sky Strikers. They're shooting missiles at these germs, and the germs are having none of it. They're shrugging off the missiles like nothing. It's quickly growing out of control. Ace crashes his, crash lands his Sky Striker near a farmer's biplane. And the other Sky Strikers are doing a cool thing. They're leaving, they're skywriting. They're using their jet contrails to tell people hey, flee your home, get out. There's a giant monster coming. And honestly, this monster's really cool. It is like the Blob. It's totally the Blob. So this is really good, sci-fi Halloween scare for it.
He's trying to snuff the blob.
And Ace has taken this farmer's old airplane, and he's spraying it with insecticide. But the Blob spit it back at him. It actually absorbed the insecticide and shot it back into Ace, who's in this old biplane, and it chokes him out, and he has to crash and hit the ground. The Sky Strikers land. It's always funny to see these giant F-14s land gently, like a helicopter, almost even in a grass field. But the gas has overcome Ace, Snake Eyes, Scarlet, Dusty. They're watching Ace, and here comes our boy Airtight, the green and yellow clad. What was he? He was the G.I. Joe. He was the special environmental trooper. It was, you guys know him. He is the guy. He's got the receding hairline, and he would go into the toxic environments. He had a great fun costume, and his weapon was kind of shaped like a vacuum cleaner, because he would go into nasty situations and suck up the chemical warfare, which is funny because today's file card we're gonna feature the Cobra version of him, the Toxo Viper, and you'll see that there's a few differences between the way Cobra and G.I. Joe treated their hazardous environmental specialists.
That's right.
So we cut to the we cut to the USS Flag, the G.I. Joe flag, the aircraft carrier.
To get the
And Airtight has
Good luck, Airtight.
he's got this giant needle-shaped airplane and a whole bunch of canisters. And the canisters have a bunch of antibiotics. So Airtight and Ace are going to fly into the, to the germ, to the blob, and they're going to like inject this what do you call it?
Why you have to go into the germ.
The antibiotics into the germ. Because how else do you stop germs? But with antibiotics.
How you gonna do that?
Airtight explains he has to get into the nucleus of it. So that's why he actually has to pierce it. So now we're getting into a little bit of Fantastic Voyage, the old movie from like the late 50s, where they shrink down and go inside someone's body. Or if you guys remember, a little more contemporary at the time, would have been the movie Inner Space with Martin Short and Dennis Quaid. And where Dennis Quaid gets shrunk and he goes into Martin Short's body. So right now, Airtight is like flying through this body of this blob, and he's getting under attack by the blob's self-defenses. Today's Filecard features on the Cobra Hostile Environment Trooper, codename Toxo Viper. The Cobra Toxo Vipers are thrust into battle situations mainly to create a foul and unsuitable environment, thus giving the upper hand to Cobra. Their battle suit is moderately airtight and resistant to most solvents. If the suit was made completely impervious to atmospheric dangers, it would be awkward, slow-moving, and most importantly, expensive. Cobra leaders feel that Toxo Vipers should be encouraged to get their jobs done quickly as possible, unburdened by heavy and expensive equipment. Needless to say, being a Toxo Viper is not something a Cobra Trooper aspires to be. In fact, the assignment is often meted out as punishment for major offenses. The mere threat of being transferred to the, quote, leaky suit brigade is enough to keep even the most obstreperous troops in line. This is one of the funnier file cards. I love how they subtly put it in there that it's moderately airtight and resistant to atmospheric dangers, and then go on to proceed to tell us that it's just too expensive to keep Cobra troops safe, even in a toxic environment. They've got a sweet little outfit that makes them look a lot like a bug, I would say. Kind of, like some kind of, like their helmet's kind of triangular shaped. They've got purple and green on. They were released in 1988 and discontinued in 1990. So sorry, Toxo Viper, you didn't have much long of a lifespan. However, he was featured in one of the commercials. He can be seen briefly and ignored for the rest of his life. And so to Toxo Viper and all the no-name Cobras who were sent out into the chemical warfare, frankly, to die, we salute you.
Now, back to G.I. Joe.
Or is it self-defenses? Who's attacking Airtight? He's inside of a germ. Oh no, there's a ton of missiles because it absorbed that Cobra base. They've got all kinds of weaponry inside this thing, and the weaponry is just exploding left and right. He's getting told to scrub the mission and get out of there. But he can't fly out. He's losing all control.
It's like trying to drive a car in Jello.
Yeah, he says it's like trying to drive a car in Jello. I was exactly what I was going to say. I don't know how you expect to navigate in Jello. Like, I would think they would have thought of that. Maybe sent like a shark. I feel like a shark would have worked better than this like needle plane, even though it has to look like a hypodermic needle. I get that, but like a shark, which could go in both water and the air. So I'm assuming it's got different thrusters in different places. But man, there's a whole lot of missiles in here that he is navigating through. But he made it.
Oh no, not again.
Only to run into giant chunks of what look like kryptonite. Corrosive enzymes, according to Airtight. There's even more missiles. Now the enzymes are acting like like immune defenses, and they're escaping some of the matter and particles that they were attached to, and they're heading towards Airtight. And he finally spots the nucleus.
There's no way of knowing.
No, the rest of the Joes, they completely lost contact with him.
You must take me
And
to
as
him.
they're waiting
I know
for
things
him,
about
Flint
that
and
germ
Dusty
that
and
you
Roadblock and Lady J,
I helped create it.
or I'm sorry, Scarlet, not Lady J. They get the crazy scientist where Bacteria X was stolen from.
I'm a doctor. That
He shows
bacteria
up and
was
he
created
explains
at
to
my
him
hospital.
that he created the bacteria. I don't know how he knows that, but I guess he put two and two. Hey, listen, he's smarter than all of us. He put two and two together, and he's saying that it's a super
Might
germ.
make it more powerful.
And the super germ is antibiotic resistant, which is actually ripped from the headlines, which I got to imagine Roger was thinking about, where they started getting the idea that we were giving people too many antibiotics when you get sick. I know I've had doctors tell me that, and I've been very upset about this because I'm like, I feel sick, give me my antibiotics. But when you get too many antibiotics, sometimes the germs kind of grow and adapt to the antibiotics that you get out there, and you get kind of like this new super germ. And that's what they're dealing with here. Airtight doesn't know that. Airtight's setting a bomb on the nucleus with these antibodies. And behind him are a couple of Cobra eels that got caught up in it. They're still fighting. Listen, you say a lot of things about Cobra. The fact that these two eels are still fighting G.I. Joe, even though this blob not only wasn't a Cobra scheme, like Cobra didn't make this blob and set it out. This was an accident that destroyed everything about Cobra. They're still fighting G.I. Joe. That's how much they hate G.I. Joe. And they're wrapped in a cool chain game with Airtight, where Airtight's attached to the bombs by a chain so that he wouldn't lose the bombs. They're falling into the nucleus, and it's all sucking Airtight in because he lost the key to it during the fight. And finally, he gets a hold of a pistol, and he blasts the gun away. Here was something really cool about that scene. All of it, no dialogue, because Airtight's alone, and those Cobra eels aren't talking. Is absolutely no dialogue to it. I love it so much. Turns out the Cobra eels didn't just come out of nowhere. They were in a ship, a Cobra ship.
My charges are set to go off in 2 minutes. Therefore,
Airtight just walked in, and inside the ship is that Crimson Guardsman.
Or we die.
And he basically says, either we're going to die together, or you let me pilot the ship and we'll get out of here. So, you know what? Scratch all that. I'm a dope. They totally were floating in that. They just stole Airtight's ship. That's what they were doing. So Airtight and the Crimson Guardsmen are escaping it, kind of like the planet Krypton. Which is a fun visual, knowing that all these guys worked on comics. And the germ's getting super doses of antibiotics. So Airtight escapes safely. However, he thinks they're going to win.
Welcome back.
But I'm willing to bet based on... Oh, okay, Flint just rubs it in the doctor's face that he was wrong. Because the blob is starting to shrink. It's starting to die. Oh, no, it's not dying. It's mitosising. It's reproducing.
Instead of 1 minute.
He supercharged it. So now there's 2 blobs. One of them headed straight for New York. And the other one, they don't really care about. Scarlet just points out that New York's doomed. The other one could be headed to Cleveland. They don't care.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe.
Cobra Invasion! Get the G.I. Joe Sky Striker! Ace the Airborne, let's get those turkeys! We're gonna get Cobra this time! Our combat jets are on the way! Hey, check my missiles! They're A-OK! Great, I'm going down for a closer look! Way to go, Joe!
G.I. Joe Sky Striker comes with Ace and 2 parachutes. Other figures sold separately from Hasbro. Now, back to G.I. Joe.
It's kind of like the end of the Superman the movie. They're like, you got the 2 missiles, and one's going to Hackensack. My mother lives in Hackensack.
It looks like I blew it.
Airtight's kind of down on himself. Shipwreck, though, in his Dunsey way, has a good idea. He says we should have tried to poison it, but they need a candy coating. Now, obviously, that's a little silly, but Airtight thinks he's onto something.
Poison in a candy coating.
Of course. Apple seeds contain a tiny amount of poison.
Boom. That doctor dropping serious knowledge. Apple seeds have poison in them. So if your human chews on it, it doesn't really hurt them. But if you eat an orchard full, it could kill that whole blob. So now they're going to use the Sky Strikers to try to kind of herd the blob into some orchards. And they're going to start bombing the blob with apples. True story. Absolutely true story now. A friend of mine, who shall remain nameless, but if you're listening, you know who you are. She was not feeling well, and she was really sluggish, and she was really feeling sleepy and kind of achy and kind of just like off, like for real, really off, and her body wasn't right for a while. she saw a couple doctors and this and that, and we were dealing with stuff. She was, and I was sitting there talking with her one day, and she was eating, chewing on some fruit in front of me, and she's like, "Hey, do you want some?" And she was eating some cherries, and I was like, "No, I'm good." And I was watching her, and she would eat the cherry, and she would eat the cherry. She wasn't spitting out the seed. And I said, "Well, what are you doing with the cherry pit?" She goes, "What are you talking about?" I go, You're eating these cherries. Where are you? You're not spitting out the cherry pits. Are they like pitless cherries?" She goes, "No, there's pits." I'm like, "You're eating the pits?" And she goes, "Yeah." What are you talking about? I go, "You don't eat cherry pits." And she's like, I've always eaten cherry pits, like ever since I was a kid. And like lately I've been on a kick. I've been eating a ton of them, like from the store, from Trader Joe's. And I'm like, you know there's poison in them, right? And she looked at me like what? I go, "Yeah, there's poison in seeds, like cherry pits and apple seeds. I know this because I saw literally this episode of G.I. Joe when I was a kid, and it taught me that there was poison in trace amounts of arsenic or cyanide in these seeds." And she was like, "You're kidding me." She stopped eating the pits, and I'm not kidding you. She felt better, 100%. She was poisoning herself by eating the pits to cherries, and that's what was making her feel crappy. It was so crazy, and I seriously learned it from Roger Sliffer's episode of G.I. Joe called The Germ. G.I. Joe saves lives. It makes lives better, everybody.
Your point's well taken.
Back to the show. The Joes have herded one of the bugs over to an orchard, and it ate it, and it shrunk it immensely. Meanwhile, we have a fun bit of characterization stuff with Shipwreck and CoverGirl kind of having a little romantic wink-a-dink in the back of an Apple truck. They're finding some success with this with this tactic, but they're all out of apples is the problem. So Ace hits Ace just shot a missile and it blew out a dam. There's a lot, it's so funny. There's a lot of Superman the movie parallels here. So first you have the problem that goes two different ways, so they have to make a choice which one to stop first. But then Ace just blew up a dam, which at the end of Superman, a dam blows up and the water flows and everything. That's kind of funny. So the Joes have taken up position outside of what was previously identified as New York, and all their ships, they're all loaded with apples. So instead of shooting lasers, they're going to be flinging apples at this thing from all their Awe Strikers and their Mobats and their Sluggers and this giant pink purple blob. There's Grunt loading a bazooka. That roadblock fires filled with apples. All their machines have been retrofitted to shoot apples. Shipwreck is literally throwing apples one at a time, not realizing that if they just let it eat their stuff, it'll also eat the apples. It's so great. The Joes are just firing apples from all their machines. I want to know how quickly they were able to retrofit it. Now, when they flee, they all jump in what might be like the East River, so they're all going to die of poisoning. Remember, this was the 80s.
If you leave now, I'll go out with you.
That was a great line. Thank you, CoverGirl. Because Shipwreck's not giving up. And she's like, "We got to go. If you leave now, I'll go out with you." Which I got to think is one of the things that Devil's Due used later. When Devil's Due made them a couple in their comic, I got to think that they pulled from this episode because it's laying the groundwork. So here come the Sky Strikers, and they're dropping like bombs. They're dropping all these apples onto this blob, and sure enough, the blob has had enough, and it explodes into nothing. It's kind of this
Germ left some
yellow goo.
disgusting stuff around here. Yeah, real disgusting.
Oh, that's awesome. So in answer to the real disgusting stuff, what happened? But a couple of cobra eels came flying out of the blob, which meets that like standards and practices thing of people can't really die, because those are the two cobras that got swallowed up by the nucleus, and they got spit out when it got blown up. So man, that's it, man. What a great fun episode. Like it's got enough Cobra. It's got enough that it's Cobra's fault, but G.I. Joe is there to save the day. Great characterization, great fun stuff with CoverGirl and Shipwreck, and Man, Roger Sliffer, we miss you. We salute you, my friend. Thank you for this. Big sky point to you. And we'll see you next week for the Viper is coming. You heard it here first, kids. The classic Viper is coming next week on Joe on Joe. Now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.